Mainstream news media likes to act like they don't have a bias, that they simply present the objective argument and that it's up to the audience to figure out what side of the argument they're on. Well, I'm going to show you how that's not really true. And it goes not even just in terms of how they present the news, but also when they have on guests and how they frame the questions. So I'm going to show you a few clips here from Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this weekend, where he had on Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill from Missouri. Now, while some of the questions were fine, the majority of them clearly slant in a certain direction. Now, the first batch of clips I'm going to show you here are 3 different questions, and focus on the framing and see if you can find the common theme among all 3.
You met with President Trump recently on tax reform. What promises did he make to you that makes you at least think about supporting his tax plan? Well, look, you're not going to get everything you want. You're in the minority. Your party's in the minority. So I guess, what are you willing to compromise on? Are you willing to support some things you don't necessarily agree with if it has some provisions in it, say 40% of what you like? So do you support lowering the corporate tax rate, for instance, down to 20%? Do you have a line in the sand of where you won't support this? Do you have a deficit line in the sand? Or if it increases the deficit even temporarily, can you support this tax cut plan?
So did you catch the common theme among those 3 questions? So the first one was, what promises did he make to you that makes you at least think about supporting his tax plan? The second question was, what are you willing to compromise on? And the third question is, do you have a line in the sand for where you won't support this tax plan? So Chuck Todd here is putting the full onus on Claire McCaskill and the Democrats to reach out and bridge the gap between the 2 parties. Where Obama for 8 years, the onus was on him to reach out to the Republican Party and make deals and have a beer with Mitch McConnell, because that would solve everything. So regardless of what party's in control, the onus seems to always be on the Democratic Party. Now, I understand that, Claire McCaskill is a moderate Democrat. So maybe in some sense, Chuck Todd thinks, well, Claire McCaskill should reach out because she's a moderate and maybe she can vote with the Republicans. But that just twists what's actually important here. And that's the actual policy. The actual tax reform is really just a tax cut for the rich. So 80% of the benefits in this tax reform plan that the GOP have go to the top 1%. So a way Chuck Todd could have asked the question was, in a perfect world, what plan would you have? What would your tax plan be, Claire McCaskill? Because we know that the GOP plan gives 80% of the benefits to the top 1%. It doesn't really close loopholes for multinational corporations who already barely pay any taxes. So what would the Democratic tax plan be if you controlled the Senate? But that's not the question. Because the onus is always on the Democratic Party to reach out and bridge the gap between the 2 parties. So that's where this bias comes from. Whether they even realize it or not, and I don't think they realize it, but it's always like the Democrats are the adults in the room, and the Republican Party are their children. And the Democratic Party has to be kind and gentle to the kids in the room because they're going to have a fit if you're not. So if you're not nice, well then it's the adults' fault. It's not the fault of the GOP and all the bullshit that they're peddling. So the next set of clips here are sort of similar, but it's about cozying up to Donald Trump.
If President Trump in the fall of 18 can say you didn't support his tax bill and your opponent is somebody that will work with him, how problematic is that for your reelection? What do you and President Trump have in common? To the Missouri voter that voted for President Trump that you're going to need if you win re-election, what would you tell them that you and President Trump have in common?
So these questions are getting progressively worse. So these set of questions are all about, how do you and Donald Trump compare? How are you working with Donald Trump so that Trump voters like you? Because in 2018, you will need those Trump voters to vote for you. But what? So that completely ignores the fact that a Republican will be going up against Claire McCaskill. So why would Claire McCaskill try and cozy up to Trump voters who will clearly just vote for the Republican candidate? What Claire McCaskill should be doing, and the question that Chuck Todd should be asking, is how are you going to reach out to voters that may have not come out in the last few elections? Voters that may feel disenfranchised from this two-party system. People that you'll need to win the next election, because we know Trump voters are more than likely going to vote for the Republican candidate. So you're going to need to find voters who maybe haven't come out in a while and need to vote for you in order for you to win. But no. Again, they go back to the existing voter base. The media never looks at or considers the people that don't vote. Because those are the people that these politicians need to get out there to vote for them. And you may think, well, they're non-voters, so why would they vote? Well, why are they non-voters? That's what you need to focus on. Because oftentimes it really comes down to the fact that neither party represents them. They don't feel represented in the political system, so why would they feel compelled to come out and vote? That's why people like Claire McCaskill and other Democrats should try and go out there and appeal to those non-voters. But no, the focus is always on the Republican voters or just the existing voter base in general. And again, I get it. Claire McCaskill's in Missouri. She herself is a moderate, if not right-wing Democrat. But that ignores the fact that Bernie Sanders does well in these sorts of states. He won West Virginia. So if Bernie Sanders, the most progressive Democrat, can win a primary in West Virginia, then maybe there are voters in Missouri that are willing to come out for a candidate that actually speaks to a message that the Democratic Party hasn't spoken to for quite a while. But no, the framing is always on the right wing. Now, the last question is the worst question. and I think immediately, if you follow politics and the Democratic Party at all, you're going to recognize what's wrong with this question.
You called yourself a moderate. Let me ask you this. Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still?
So you can see why this is the worst question. Is the Democratic Party open to moderates still? Yeah, that's essentially the entire party. The entire party is a moderate party, if not a right-wing party. So these labels have moved so far to the right that Chuck Todd doesn't even realize how right-wing the Democratic Party right now is, at least in terms of when you look at parties around the world. America essentially has two right-wing parties. The Democratic Party is at best a centrist party, and the Republican Party is crazy far right-wing. There is no left-wing party in the US. So, yes, the Democratic Party is open to moderates. Now, maybe in his defense, he meant the voters, which would be a better question. Because at this point, I don't think that there are really many Democratic voters that are holding on to moderate policies. The base and the majority of the country approves of progressive policies like Medicare for all. But that's not what the parties are discussing. The parties are discussing how low can we lower the corporate tax rate. That's where the discussion is right now. So I put this little video together for Twitter. I'm going to share it here. It's a 24-second video. At some point, it will get super annoying, and that's the point where it ends. So enjoy.
You called yourself a moderate. Let me ask you this. Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still? Do you think the Democratic Party is open to moderates still?
So to me, these questions showcase just how out of touch mainstream news is. And not just even with just the audience, but also in terms of how mainstream news views itself. So NBC, ABC, CBS, these networks see themselves as a neutral force, that they simply present the facts and that the audience can take from that what they want. But the reality is they present a bias. They just don't acknowledge it. Now, their bias happens to be either right-wing or moderate. And who do right-wing moderate positions benefit? The rich, the powerful, multinational corporations. But they don't acknowledge that. And until you stop and actually look at the question, you don't realize how things are being framed. So a question like, what do you and President Trump have in common? Asking that to a Democrat automatically puts the Democrat into a position of feeling like they have to compromise to the right wing and find a common ground with a crazy right-wing president, when the reality is they don't. They should be principled in their positions and in the policies they present. But mainstream news keeps trying to push this narrative of the Democrats have to give in to the right wing. And look what's happened over the past 30 years. They have. So until you stop and actually look at the questions and analyze how they're framed, you don't recognize that.